Welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker University podcast series. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, author of The Wealthy Speaker 2.0. Today we are talking to media expert Gerard Braud about how to get noticed and shine in the media. Welcome, Gerard.
Hey, good to see you again, Jane.
I'm so excited that you're here today. Let me do a quick little introduction of you. Gerard has been a reporter for 15 years, seen on CNN, NBC, CBS, BBC, the past 20 years as a media training expert on 5 continents, author of the book, Don't Talk to the Media Until, 29 Secrets You Need to Know Before You Open Your Mouth to a Reporter, chairman of the NSA Media Lab in 2015, and not only has he been a journalist, but he has been quoted as a spokesperson and expert for more than 500 publications around the world. So, Gerard, we are going to break this down today into my kind of ready, aim, fire formula that I typically use for everything. So when we decide that we're going to go for media, let's say we use our model, what's the first step in the ready stage?
Well, it's to know that the media ask one question all the time, and that is, who cares? So from your perspective as a speaker and an expert, for that of all the folks listening, you need to identify what makes you and what makes your topic newsworthy, in as much as what benefit does that bring to the media's audience. This is important. Not why you think you're special and wonderful, but why you, the speaker expert, think that the public would benefit from knowing about your topic. So make it about them, not about you.
Okay, so are you saying my new company that I want to send out a press release to let them know about is probably not going to make it?
Nobody cares. I got an email today from somebody who launched a new website. I don't care. Tell me what's in it for me. Every one of us is selfish by nature. And we want to know what's in it for me. Well, as speakers, when we're on stage, we have to have that proportion of you language directed toward the audience versus I language directed toward the speaker. And it's the same thing with dealing with the media. So that's the first step of the ready stage. The second step of the ready stage is to, once you know what it is that you want to talk about because it's of importance to the audience, you really want to script out what you're going to say in the interview. And again, we can use the same model that we use in speaking. You have to know exactly what your open is going to be. You need to know what your close is, and you need to know what the 3 points are in the middle. Now, I go so far in my training with a lot of the speakers I work with, actually script out the answer to the first question, even though we don't necessarily know what the first question is going to be. And many people say, how do you do that? And the answer is by harnessing what the universal truths are for the audience. So everybody can agree on this, everybody can agree on that, and everybody can agree on that. What you need to know about that is, and one of the interesting things is I learned from those old sales speakers that started NSA, the great Zig Ziglars and Cabot Roberts, that many of those guys were door-to-door salesmen or trained door-to-door salesmen, and they had a methodology called the 2 yes, 3 yes rule. If you could get the person who answers the door to say yes to your premise 2 or 3 times, they'll agree with most of your premise. And in those days, they would buy. So if you're a full of brush salesman and you could promise them shinier toilets, ma'am, is that something you'd be interested in? The homemaker would say yes, you were likely to make the sale. And I do that same technique with crafting and preparing the opening sentences in what I would call part 2 of the ready phase.
Okay. So, one of the things that we hear a lot about is talk in sound bites. And I know we're going to get more into that in the fire stage. So let's move on to number 3. What's a third thing that people need to know in the ready phase?
Practice. Just like you practice for a speech, you have to practice and role play the interview. Now, my area of expertise is actually teaching these training courses. And what I do is I have a broadcast video camera that I set up. And after I've written the words that the speaker or the guest on the TV show is going to use, or in a print or radio interview, after I've written these words, we're going to put these folks on camera, and I'm going to play reporter, and they're going to play guest, and we're going to do the interview over and over again. We do it, we evaluate it, we critique it, we do it again. We do it, we evaluate it, we critique it, we do it again. And it's through the repetition that you get good. Just like a speaker needs multiple repetitions on stage in order to really nail their presentation, you need to invest a lot of practice in this. And one of the things I always teach in the media training classes, and it's one of my 29 lessons, is to think of it this way. If you could attach $1 to every word that you say, would you make money or would you lose money? In as much as if an interview could be worth $5,000 in publicity or maybe $100,000 in publicity, is it not worth preparing for and training for and practicing for? Or do you have a big ego and you think you can just wing it? Doing an interview with the media is not like talking like we're doing right now. It's an art form. There's science to it, and there's a lot of psychology to it.
So you're not saying that more words are necessarily better. Would you not say that the media's pet peeve might be that people just drone on and on and on?
They do drone on and on and on. And what you have to look at is how do the media write stories? So if it's a story that's going to be edited for print, TV, or radio, the reporter is going to use the inverted pyramid. And the best way for a non-journalist to think of this inverted pyramid is to, of course, draw an inverted pyramid on the page, but also pick up today's newspaper if you can find one. On that page, you're going to find a headline, and the first part of the story is a synopsis sentence, and then you're going to get to a quote. In TV, it's called a soundbite. But regardless, there is a headline, a synopsis, and a quote. If you learn to speak in headlines, synopsis, summaries, and then quotes, and realize that people are not really interested in details, they're interested in quick, consumable bits of information, then you're going to be right on path, right on course. Another way to think about it is think of how you, the speaker, consume news. Do you read it online? Do you read it in print? And if you read it in print, online, or on a newspaper, how do you read the newspaper? You usually read a headline, you'll read the first 2 or 3 sentences, and then you turn the page or flip on your iPad to something else. You seldom read to the end because you don't care about someone else's details, which makes us question, why do you think anybody cares about your details? So it's part of a branding mechanism. It's not about educating everyone about everything you do. Think of it as an icebreaker to who you are and 3 actionable tips that the audience can take to improve their lives.
All right. Well, some of our listeners might think, wow, it's kind of harsh. But that is actually the reality of the media. And, Gerard, I know maybe being in the media for so many years might have made you a little bit jaded.
A lot of it.
And so I think that we're just telling it how it is. And you know what? For everything we talk about on these podcasts, there's an opposite way to try it. And a lot of times that will work as well. So we're just going to lay out the foundation for you. Take what you want and leave the rest. How's that?
Yeah, the main thing is, though, to realize that inverted pyramid is how they're going to write that story. Now, if it's a TV interview, it's going to be the same technique, but a TV interview is probably, if it's live in a morning show, only going to be 3 minutes. So again, realize that you have to quickly get to what are the 3 nuggets that the audience can take away in a short amount of time. Less is more.
Okay, so 3 minutes. That's a very good number to keep in mind. Now, sometimes the media will find you, and other times you're going to have to pitch the media in hopes that they will feature you. What do you think is the best way to get before them in the AIM phase?
Well, this is the AIM phase could go 2 ways. So they'll find you based on certain keywords that they search for. So even though I'm a media training expert, I train many people to do interviews when they have a crisis. So I'm also known as a crisis communications expert. So if you'd like to, while you're listening to this call, just type in crisis communications expert in your Google search and see where I come up. Usually, organically, I'm number 1, and often I come up 3 or 4 more times on that page. That's good search engine optimization because I want to be interviewed about other people's crises and how they should be solved. So sometimes the aim is in your search engine optimization on your website and where you rank. But more often than not, the media will not find you. You have to go searching for them. And that's where you really have to aim. So your search engine optimization keywords can be part of the aim, but there's a 3-part process to aiming. I would say if you've never done interviews before, start with your local media, your local magazines, your local print, newspaper, radio, television. Start small and work your way up. Use the analogy of speakers. When you first start speaking, you speak to the Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club and whatever small civic organization there is to get your feet wet. And you kind of do the same thing. Aim for local media. Try to find some timing in there that, if your expertise is organizational skills, January 1st is a great time to start the new year right with organizational skills. Likewise, the first day of spring is how to do spring cleaning. The first day of fall is a great time to how to organize your closet. So those organizational skills could have timing mechanisms, and that's why you would pitch it to the local media. But you've also got the option to know that you have a niche and certain reporters have a niche. So if you're a health expert and there's a health columnist for your local newspaper, only pitch to that person. The sports reporter doesn't care about that, but the health reporter does. So you've got that ability to niche, or niche, if you want to say it that way, based on a type of reporter. And then the third aim that you could take is to look for a niche or niche in the types of publications, whether it's a trade publication or an online blog. If, again, your expertise is fashion, then pitch to fashion bloggers. Pitch to the fashion section on the web. Pitch to the fashion section of the Huffington Post. But that doesn't mean the Wall Street Journal wants to cover you. So know what your area of expertise is. And just like you always teach us, Jane, pick a lane. You do the same mechanism by picking the lane in the media who are most likely to cover you. Don't just throw spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks. Right. Pick your niche, pick your lane, and go after other people who care about the same things that you're passionate about.
And I really like the idea of being timely with whatever you're pitching. Maybe there's something in the national headlines that you could speak to on a local level. So there might be things that you're scanning the Wall Street Journal for or the Huffington Post every day to say, ooh, I can comment on that because that's hot news right now. How can we take that to a local level, or how can I weigh in on this subject? Because
you're right. That is often the best way to get coverage, because it keeps you from being self-centered, as we talked about in the ready phase. You've always taught folks in the Wealthy Speaker program to be an expert, not just to be a subject matter talker, but to truly be an expert. And again, this helps position you as an expert so that if, we'll take Dr. Bruce Weinstein, the ethics expert up in New York, a buddy of ours, if there is an ethical situation in the news, that's the time for him to call his media and say, you notice there's an ethical dilemma about this doctor. Let's talk about this. I can be your guest. So being an expert in your niche, brilliant idea. Always works.
Okay, so the fire section, and I hope people will notice, you talked about knowing what the 3 points are going to be. We're talking in threes today. Why do you think threes work?
I've actually asked a bunch of psychologists, and they can't tell me scientifically why it happens. But what they do know is people simply remember things in threes. And that means that you, as the speaker guest on the TV show or the guest for the newspaper or radio program, you will remember your thoughts if you simplify them into threes, and your audience will take it away easier if you simplify it in fours. Many people make the fatal mistake in the fire phase when they get into the interview with a reporter of trying to tell them everything they know, and they almost create a laundry list or a grocery list of, you need to know this and this and this and this and this. No, our brains can't remember that. And when we have information overload, what are the 3 things you need to know? Again, less is more.
Okay, all right. So we're moving into the aim phase. Much like you picked your lane and your niche and pick audiences and conferences that will benefit from niche, you do the same thing with media. So how do people actually roll this out and get noticed? Oh, sorry. I'm backing up us to aim when actually what I meant to ask you was around fire.
Fire, yes.
We've done what we wanted to do, and now we're actually ready to get out there and talk to people. So you're under the hot lights.
Mm-hmm.
Give us let's talk television and talk to me about how to perfectly land the answer to the first question.
Well, part of that is establishing what the truths are going to be. If you think about especially morning TV, where there are more talk show segments, where it's easier for you to be invited as a guest, you never know what the anchor is going to ask you first. And the anchors have egos, and they often want to pontificate, and you never know how long the pontification is going to go.
Oh boy, have I ever seen that.
Hmm? Yeah. And if it's morning TV, these people have been up since 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And by the time you're on the air at 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, they're sleep deprived. So their attention span is pretty short. You're lucky if they even remember your name and your topic. So they tend to throw out almost an ambiguous question. Seldom is it direct. And the way that you have to succeed in the fire stage is to perfectly land the answer to the question that you practiced in the ready phase. So we did the media training. First, we wrote out the answers, and then we did the media training where we put you on camera and practice and critique. And since then, you've been using these phrases every day in your life to try to internalize them so that when you deliver them, they sound spontaneous and organic and natural. You don't want them to sound rehearsed. So perfect landing of that number one in the fire is don't sound rehearsed. Let me give you an example. You mentioned in the introduction that I was chairman of the National Speakers Association Media Lab, and one of the folks who attended was Bruce Weinstein, who I referenced just a minute ago. And Bruce volunteered to get up on stage. We were doing a mock media training, and Bruce did okay, but Bruce could have done a lot better. And Bruce has done a lot of national TV, and he really wants to do more. So I took him aside afterwards, and we critiqued a little bit. I said, just call me next time you get ready to do an interview, and I'll coach you up just before it. Well, he calls me about an hour later, and he goes, I'm booked on Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. I need help right away. He sent me an email, and my wife and I, we're in New York City. We go to Jersey Boys. I'm writing on the playbill in Jersey Boys, and my wife, Cindy, who is elbowing me, telling me, put that down, pay attention. I got to write a soundbite for Bruce. So 12:15 in the morning after Jersey Boys and cocktails, here's what I wrote to Bruce. I'm going to read from the email. Now, the story, just so that you have background, is it was the ethical dilemma of a lady who needed a kidney, a person who volunteered to give this stranger a kidney, and the stranger was going to be out of work. The donor was going to be out of work. And a bunch of people got together on a website and decided to raise money for the donor to pay for their medical bills and their time away from work. Okay. Well, that's against the law to give money to someone who gives an organ. That's considered.
Right.
So that's the ethical dilemma. Okay. So I told Bruce, I said, start with the truth that the entire audience can agree with. Remember, that's the 2 yes, 3 yes rule. So this is what I told Bruce to say. Here are the truths we know. A sick person can be saved. A seemingly well-intentioned person has stepped up, and other well-intentioned people stepped up to raise money for the donor's recovery. If doctors take an oath that says do no harm, then we also have to ask the question, does this law or the interpretation of this law do harm to the patient? In this case, harm to both the sick person and the donor. And I said, when you get into follow-up answer, start by saying, well, I'm not a legal expert. I'm an ethics expert, so I can say. All right. So That's the email he got. And I said, Bruce, repeat this over and over again. Practice the interview. Set up your iPhone, role play, et cetera, et cetera. Let's hear the audio now from Bruce's actual interview. And let's see how close Bruce was able to come on Fox and Friends the next morning to what I sent him at 12:15 in the morning.
Okay.
Thanks for being with us. Great to be here.
Dr. Weinstein, I mean, this is a tough, between a rock and a hard place, a spot that the hospital is in, because they've got two ethical responsibilities, a duty to restore health and also a duty to obey the law. So where do they go?
So here are the truths we know. Number one, a woman is sick and needs a kidney to survive. Number two, a man has stepped up to the plate to donate his own kidney. And number three, people all over the world are donating thousands of dollars to help the donor recover. So how can the Maine Medical Center honor its obligation, as you say, to help the patient and to honor a law that says you can't sell your kidneys? Well, look, I'm an ethics expert, not a legal expert, right. But the ethical solution is so straightforward. I can't even believe it hasn't come up yet. And that is, you keep the amount of money that the law allows, about $6,000, and then you give the rest back. Then the physicians are in compliance with the law. And
so did he nail it?
Yeah, he totally nailed it. Well done.
The only thing that happened there was, I think as he realized, oh my gosh, this is actually working, he started getting excited. He started speeding up. And what you really want to do when you get excited on the air is to slow down. You don't want to speed up. But other than that, regardless of what the first question was going to be, Bruce knew what the first answer was going to be. And while that sounds simple, it is very hard to practice to the point that you're going to nail it. But it absolutely can be done. So being the perfect first answer, that's the first part of the fire stage.
Nice.
Now, what Bruce did also set us up for the second part of the fire stage, which is to be the perfect guest. So you get invited back by this media, and so you get called by the other media. And Bruce, it was also funny, I didn't mention to you, but I put in the email, because it was a 2-day media lab, I said, Bruce, I'll bet you $20, and I'll give you $20 at the lab on stage tomorrow if you come back with a video clip and prove that you followed my instructions. So I dangled the carrot. I know you're famous for always telling us to dangle the carrot on our website. I dangled a carrot, a $20 bill in front of him, to which he came back. He goes, actually, I should be paying you for the training. And I was thinking, yes, you should be paying me for the training. I was happy to do it for a friend.
That actually leads me to a question that I've had this whole time. Okay, so in terms of, there's all kinds of people out there who can help you. Should people hire a media coach so that they know how to handle that? I mean, how much was that worth for Bruce?
That was worth a whole lot of money. And let me tell you how much. Let's see if we can calculate what that was worth. He was on for about 3 minutes on Fox and Friends, a national cable show. And we would need to find out what a TV commercial cost on Fox and Friends if you buy it across the nation and their broadcast. So let's just say that it costs, I don't know, $50,000 for a commercial. So multiply that for 30 seconds. So if it's $50,000 for 30 seconds times 6, that's $300,000 worth of publicity. However, no, it's not worth that. It's worth 3 times more than that, because news is perceived 3 times more critical. So it's about $600,000. It could be $500,000 in publicity. So if you're going to get $500,000 worth of publicity, is it worth investing money in a coach? It's kind of like, I hire Lou Heckler, a mutual friend of ours, to train me for my keynotes. Because if I'm going to charge X amount of dollars, then I'm happy to pay him his fair share to make me worth that money and to get me more. So without being a hypocrite, I'm a trainer who charges people to do this. I also hire trainers. I hire you. I hire Mark LeBlanc. I hire Lou Heckler. I hire people to make me better. So yes, if you're ready to play in the big leagues, you need to have a coach. And like anybody else, you need to pick the coach that is right for you. There are lots of people who can teach you media interview skills, like there are many people who can teach branding and many who can teach keynotes. Get a coach. I mean, the biggest mistake, I've told you this many times, the biggest mistake I've made in my career is waiting too long to spend money on you and Lou and Mark. It was the biggest mistake I've made, seriously, because I was a penny pitcher and I waited 10 years and I've paid for it dearly. Now I'm profiting well. Thank you.
All right. So let me ask you one more question as a subset of that. Let's say you are planning to do a lot of television. Should you hire an image consultant potentially to help you kind of raise your platform in that regard as well?
It could be done. When I'm teaching media training, I do work with the folks on how to sit, how to dress, what to wear in the interview, posture, body language. So all of that is an important part of it. Usually, I don't see a need for a full-fledged body image makeover because usually it's as simple as saying wear that blue jacket with that baby blue shirt and that nice red tie, or wear a gray or a blue dress and, wear these types of shoes. And, for ladies, my preference is that you should wear a hosiery as opposed to going bare-legged because it acts as makeup to prevent a shine. So there are some very basic tips. I have sent a handful of people for professional training, especially when it's somebody who needs physical makeup or hair. I don't do hair and makeup. I'm sorry, that's not my area of specialty, but I do know people who do it. So, for example, I had a doctor I was training to be on ABC 2020 for a medical show, and she had very curly permed hair. She hadn't changed her hairstyle since perms were in the 80s, and light would shine through her hair, and it would just create this glowing effect, and it was a horrible image. So to that extent, she needed to go get her hair straightened, cut, all of that. And then she needed somebody to do tonal makeup. Guys, we're pretty easy. Slap a bunch of powder on us, and for the most part, get rid of the shine and get a reasonable haircut, and we're going to be okay.
Now, at what level of station would they not do your makeup for you before going on?
They are, you know what? Don't ever count on them doing your makeup.
Okay.
Definitely not going to do it at the local level, and at the national level, they're just going to slap some powder on you.
Okay.
I will say this, makeup for TV is really hard to do. Makeup for television is not like a gal would wear out on the street. Mm-hmm. It's generally thicker. Makeup for guys often requires something called beard concealer. I'm the kind of guy to where I can go 10 days without shaving before somebody goes, "Did you not shave this morning?" But I could shave very close right now and get on TV and I look horrible because lights penetrate your skin like an onion peel, and a man's black beard shows up as blue. So the way to correct the color blue on a color wheel is to add a red or an orange over it. So there's a Hollywood makeup called beard concealer that is orange. So that's why you might see Donald Trump looking very orange, or Jay Leno, I remember when he was on the Today Show, always looked very orange. And that's because it offsets the color blue, but then you have to go back over that with flesh tones. I never, in the 15 years that I was on TV, I never ever felt comfortable with what I learned to do myself, nor did I ever have anybody to do it. So I am not the one to go to on getting the how-to. I can tell you the pitfalls of it, but I'm not the guy who's going to be able to make you look pretty. So to that extent, you might want to get a TV makeup expert, not just a makeup expert.
All right. So in order to be the perfect guest while you're there, what are some things that you want to do and don't want to do?
Definitely don't want to sell, and you don't want to be self-promoting. That will get you voted off the island very quickly, and you will never come back again. One of the things that you must remember is what we talked about in the ready phase. Don't be self-focused, but be audience-focused. And then be articulate and intelligent, but also let the person asking the questions appear to be articulate and intelligent, especially in live TV. But when I was hosting live programs, my greatest fear was not looking stupid. And I know the host was, as the host, I was worried about that. The guest was also worried about that. So mutually, you want to do what you can to help each other along in the interview. And when you are that perfect guest, then you get invited back again. And that was also one of the things that when, to use the example of Bruce Weinstein, he was so thrilled that the producer came up to him after the show and went, "That was amazing, Bruce. That was your best interview ever. We need to have you on more often." So that has led to more bookings for him. And, there's always that question of, do you hire a booking agent or do you go after it yourself?
Right.
The best relationship you can have, and again, it's about relationships, just like you have relationships with meeting planners in the speaking industry, having relationships with producers and being able to send them that tickler. Hey, Kathy, I saw this thing in the news. If you want to talk about the ethical side of it, we could do that. That's when you're in that sweet spot, and that's when you're the perfect guest. You get invited back.
Right. And you're really thinking about it from their perspective all the time. Okay, so what would be our final step in the fire stage?
I always teach the lesson, if you could attach $1 to every word that comes out of your mouth, would you make money? Would you lose money? We talked about that earlier. So I would say, how do you monetize the interview? Is there the potential that you can take the clip or whether it's a print clip or a web clip or video, can you take that and publicize it and share it with your community? Just about everybody in the speaking business does some degree of content marketing with a social media presence on Instagram or Twitter or wherever it happens to be, Facebook, whatever works for you, LinkedIn. So share that clip with your bigger tribe. And if you've got good friends who will also share it with their tribes, that helps you to get noticed. All of this is part of a slow drip process designed to help us get booked on stage, help us to sell more products, help us to sell our books. So you want to hopefully get a gig out of it, or more than one gig out of it. Or maybe you hope to sell books. Sometimes networks like Fox and Friends, where Bruce was, will actually invite you on as an author to talk about your book. That tends to be more of the rarity. But, if you can make $1 because you were on TV for 30 seconds or 3 minutes and you can get an engagement out of it, or book sales or product sales, that's a very sweet spot to be in.
A lot of people think that one big national interview is going to change everything in their career. Do you think that that's really realistic?
It is not going to change your career in a single interview unless you're just the most amazing, spectacular individual on the face of the earth. And the chances are that there might be other people who are more spectacular than you. What you have to do is be humble enough and modest enough to realize it's not going to change your life with a single interview in all likelihood. It is a bigger part of the repetition of the marketing machine that helps position you as an expert and helps you get known. So if out of the interview you get asked to do another interview, and that leads to 2 more interviews, and that leads to 4 interviews, and you're now perceived as a regular guest on certain shows and columnist and things like this, now you're starting to reach a critical mass. But a single interview doesn't mean that immediately the biggest conference in the world wants to bring you into the $1 million roundtable, or it doesn't mean that SHRM wants to bring you in as their opening and closing keynoter. It doesn't always mean that. So it's important that we as speakers can humble ourselves to know it's part of the ongoing machine and not be so delusional to think that I was on Good Morning Des Moines and suddenly now I'm ready to be on national TV, or that I'm going to get the biggest stage in the planet. It's just, it's part of a holistic approach. However, you shining in the media really is part of that brand that says, I am an expert. I'm either arriving, or I'm starting to arrive, or I have arrived. And that's the sweet spot that you want to be in as an expert speaker.
Right. And what we would do with that in the marketing is we would make sure that it's right there on the homepage of your website, the interview, at least the logo. If you've got a lot of interviews, you might have the logos of the places that you've been seen. So And it's all flashpoints, don't you think? I mean, every time you hit another little peak, it's like, okay, that's just a step in the right direction, and this is a step in the next direction, and there's always going to be things that will take you to the next. But I don't know that any one thing will really make or break your career. So I appreciate you giving us these tips so much, because I think that people really do need to know what is going to help them take their career to the next level. Might be getting that media, might be getting seen on national TV, might be getting heard on the radio. What else do we need to tell them about kind of being great when they get the opportunity?
I would go back to the practice phase. You cannot just go in there and wing it. If you wing it, you will crash and burn. Another thing to think about is, in life, you're often asked direct questions and you respond with a direct answer. And that's not necessarily the way a media interview works. Reporters don't spend a lot of time preparing for their questions. In 15 years as a journalist, I don't think I ever wrote down a single question in 15 years, and in 5,000 interviews or 10,000 interviews that I may have done, I never wrote down a question. They're all spontaneous. So don't put too much weight on a direct question to a direct answer. You have to think of, what's the question behind the questions? What's the essence of what they're asking, and how does that relate back to the audience? And that's why I've been successful with people when I take this approach of, begin your answer by having well-worded phrases that are quotable. What I gave Bruce was the beginning of an answer. It wasn't the entire answer. It was the beginning of the answer. So really practicing to the point that you've internalized. And the difference between internalizing and memorizing is all in your head. Internalizing is when you know it in your heart to be true. So that, for me, in that ready phase, is what makes a good fire phase.
Right. And then you're just having a lovely conversation with them. It doesn't feel like you're up in your head trying to think about where you're going to go next. Well, Gerard, thank you so much. I mean, this has been outstanding. Both your first name and your last name are a little bit tricky. So let's make sure people know how to get in touch with you. And let's also remind them about the book that you have.
Sure. So I'm French Cajun. So Gerard is spelled like Gerard, Gerard, and Braud is spelled like Braud, Braud, good French name. So my website is Braud, Braud Communications with an S. And if you go to my learning store, you can find a copy of Don't Talk to the Media Until 29 Secrets You Need to Know Before You Open Your Mouth to a Reporter, which is just a handy dandy little book. And I'll tell you, I'll sweeten the pot. I have a good online 29-day program that goes along with the book. So if anybody from the Wealthy Speaker University buys a copy of the book, I will give them the 29-day online training course to go with it.
I'm so excited for the people that they are going to get that. And I want to say thank you so much for your time today. And we appreciate you. Thank you again.